The weather continued rainy and ungenial for some days after Mr. Hunt's return to Nodowa. Yet spring was rapidly advancing, and vegetation was putting forth with all its early freshness and beauty. The snakes began to recover from their torpor and crawl forth into day, and the neighborhood of the wintering house seems to have been much infested with them. Mr. Bradbury, in the course of his botanical researches, found a surprising number in a half-torpid state, under flat stones upon the banks which overhung the cantonment, and narrowly escaped being struck by a rattlesnake, which darted at him from a cleft in the rock, but fortunately gave him warning by his rattle. The pigeons, too, were filling the woods in vast migratory flocks. It is almost incredible to describe the prodigious flights of these birds in the western wildernesses. They appear absolutely in clouds and move with astonishing velocity, their wings making a whistling sound as they fly. The rapid evolutions of these flocks wheeling and shifting suddenly as if with one mind and one impulse. The flashing changes of color they present as their backs, their breasts, or the under part of their wings are turned to the spectator, are singularly pleasing. When they alight, if on the ground, they cover whole acres at a time. If upon trees, the branches often break beneath their weight. If suddenly startled while feeding in the midst of a forest, the noise they make in getting on the wing is like the roar of a cataract or the sound of distant thunder. A flight of this kind, like an Egyptian flight of locusts, devours everything that serves for its food as it passes along. So great were the numbers in the vicinity of the camp that Mr. Bradbury, in the course of a morning's excursion, shot nearly 300 with a fowling piece. He gives a curious, though apparently a faithful account of the kind of discipline observed in these immense flocks, so that each may have a chance of picking up food, as the front ranks must meet with the greatest abundance, and the rear ranks must have scanty pickings. The instant a rank finds itself the hindmost, it rises in the air, flies over the whole flock, and takes its place in the advance. The next rank follows in its course, and thus the last is continually becoming first, and all by turns have a front place at the banquet. The rains having at length subsided, Mr. Hunt broke up the encampment and resumed his course up the Missouri. The party now consisted of nearly 60 persons, of whom 5 were partners. One, John Reed, was a clerk. 40 were Canadian voyageurs, or engages, and there were several hunters. They embarked in 4 boats, one of which was of a large size, mounting a swivel, and 2 howitzers. All were furnished with masts and sails, to be used when the wind was sufficiently favorable and strong to overpower the current of the river. Such was the case for the first 4 or 5 days, when they were wafted steadily up the stream by a strong southeaster. Their encampments at night were often pleasant and picturesque, on some beautiful bank beneath spreading trees which afforded them shelter and fuel. The tents were pitched, the fires made, and the meals prepared by the voyageurs, and many a story was told, and joke passed, and song sung round the evening fire. All, however, were asleep at an early hour, some under the tents, others wrapped in blankets before the fire or beneath the trees, and some few in the boats and canoes. On the 28th they breakfasted on one of the islands which lie at the mouth of the Nebraska, or Platte River, the largest tributary of the Missouri, and about 600 miles above its confluence with the Mississippi. This broad but shallow stream flows for an immense distance through a wide and verdant valley scooped out of boundless prairies. It draws its main supplies by several forks or branches from the Rocky Mountains. The mouth of this river is established as the dividing point between the upper and lower Missouri, and the earlier voyagers, in their toilsome ascent, before the introduction of steamboats, considered one half of their labors accomplished when they reached this place. The passing of the mouth of the Nebraska, therefore, was equivalent among boatmen to the crossing of the line among sailors, and was celebrated with like ceremonials of a rough and waggish nature, practiced upon the uninitiated, among which was the old nautical joke of shaving. The river deities, however, like those of the sea, were to be propitiated by a bribe, and the infliction of these rude honors to be parried by a treat to the adepts. At the mouth of the Nebraska new signs were met with of war parties, which had recently been in the vicinity. There was the frame of a skin canoe, in which the warriors had traversed the river. At night also the lurid reflection of immense fires hung in the sky, showing the conflagration of great tracts of the prairies. Such fires not being made by hunters so late in the season, it was supposed they were caused by some wandering war parties. These often take the precaution to set the prairies on fire behind them to conceal their traces from their enemies. This is chiefly done when the party has been unsuccessful and is on the retreat and apprehensive of pursuit. At such time it is not safe even for friends to fall in with them, as they are apt to be in savage humor and disposed to vent their spleen in capricious outrage. These signs, therefore, of a band of marauders on the prowl called for some degree of vigilance on the part of the travelers. After passing the Nebraska, the party halted for a part of 2 days on the bank of the river, a little above Papillion Creek, to supply themselves with a stock of oars and poles from the tough wood of the ash, which is not met with higher up the Missouri. While the voyagers were thus occupied, the naturalists rambled over the adjacent country to collect plants. From the summit of a range of bluffs on the opposite side of the river, about 250 feet high, they had one of those vast and magnificent prospects which sometimes unfold themselves in those boundless regions. Below them was the valley of the Missouri, about 7 miles in breadth, clad in the fresh verdure of spring, enameled with flowers and interspersed with clumps and groves of noble trees, between which the mighty river poured its turbulent and turbid stream. The interior of the country presented a singular scene, the immense waste being broken up by innumerable green hills, not above 8 feet in height, but extremely steep and actually pointed at their summits. A long line of bluffs extended for upwards of 30 miles parallel to the Missouri, with a shallow lake stretching along their base, which had evidently once formed a bed of the river. The surface of this lake was covered with aquatic plants, on the broad leaves of which numbers of water snakes, drawn forth by the genial warmth of spring, were basking in the sunshine.